31 days of October, week 3. What's up, guys? Welcome to 31 days of October, week 3. Got some great guests for you guys today. First off though, I've created a playlist for 2017 31 days of October, so you can see week 1 and week 2 if you missed them. Had some great guests over there, and looking forward to getting into week 3. And my two guests today are brand new. They haven't done 31 days for the past 2 years. So I have two good friends, Cody Leach, and I got Durbin from Durbania. And I'm really excited to have these guys as part of this year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they come up with. And they both do phenomenal videos, really high quality entertainment. I promise you, you will love their channels, and tell them Lee sent you. But first, let's get into my good friend Cody from Cody Leach. We've done so many collabs together before. We've done, he's part of my Scream stream now. So anyway, take it away, Cody.
What's going on, everybody? Cody Leach here. Hopefully you recognize me, maybe you don't, but you're gonna remember me after this because I have some awesome movies to tell you about on 31 days of Halloween. All right, let's talk about what I watched this week. So first up is a movie that is often confused with a really popular and well-deserved anthology movie with a very similar title. Just a slight little difference, and it's a movie that me and Lee will tell you all the time, this is a must if you are not only a metal fan, but a horror fan too, and that is Trick or Treat. This is a classic 80s metal horror movie, one of my favorites, one of the movies that I absolutely grew up with and cherished growing up, that I felt like I was the only one in the world who ever saw this damn thing, because it's one of those hidden treasures that people often completely overlook or have never heard of before, and you need to change that. So this was the first thing that I watched this week. This is a absolute must-watch every single October for me. Not necessarily a Halloween staple, but absolutely in the month of October, this is a movie that I pop in. Basically tells the story of this guy, Henry Weinbauer, sorry, and he has this idol, Sammy Kerr. He's basically like the Ozzy Osbourne of this movie universe. And the beginning of the movie, Sammy Kerr dies in a hotel fire, and the dude, Weinbauer, just loses his mind. His idol is gone. The guy that he looks up to, that he wants to be, is dead, but not for long. Because he gets from Gene Simmons, yes, Gene Simmons and Ozzy Osbourne actually have a role in this, and Gene Simmons is pretty damn good. Gives him the last known recording of Sammy Kerr in an album that has not been released yet, as just kind of this parting gift. He goes home, plays the record backwards, and he can hear Sammy Kerr from beyond the dead. And Sammy Kerr helps him get back at his bullies, helps him get the girl at school. But then, as a horror movie will tell you, shit starts to go wrong. And I'm not gonna tell you anything more about it, because if you're a metal fan and a horror fan, this is a must watch. This is actually like a kind of a fan-made Blu-ray on eBay. If you can find more like this, absolutely pick it up. But if not, the DVD's out there somewhere. I'm sure it'll get a Scream Factory release. Fingers crossed at some point. But awesome movie, one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. I'm not even kidding you. If you love 80s metal, this movie will have you headbanging the entire time. One of my favorites. Check it out. The next thing that I watched this week, speaking of holidays, Black Christmas. Now I have Lee himself to thank for introducing me to this movie. I had always heard about it, never knew if this is something that was really gonna be my cup of tea. Is it a movie that's too far gone? Is it too dated for me to enjoy it? No. This is one of the honestly most genuinely unnerving and terrifying movies that you will find. This is kind of the movie that kind of started the slasher genre even before Halloween came along. Basically, you have this sorority house and this maniac up in the attic who slowly starts picking off these girls. And again, trying to keep things as spoiler-free as possible, that's all I'm going to tell you. All I will tell you is what Lee told me. If you are watching this for the first time, turn the lights down, turn the volume up, and prepare to be unnerved, because the sound of this guy's voice, this kind of started another thing that kind of went through horror with, especially When a Stranger Calls, the killer actually calling and taunting the victims. There's multiple sequences in this movie where the killer calls. His voice and the sounds that he makes will chill you down to your spine. This was an awesome movie, a fantastic ending. I cannot recommend this movie enough. This is probably one of the greatest things that Lee has ever recommended, that I automatically just bought, added to my shelf, and thank you, Lee, for introducing me to this classic. And if you have not seen it, trust me, right that wrong, get Black Christmas, check it out. The next thing that I watched this week is a movie that I have heard of ever since I was a kid, because I remember my grandma, for whatever reason, this was the only horror movie that she actually had in her VHS collection, and I remember my dad telling me what the movie was about, and it took until last week for me to finally watch it. Over 25 years for me to watch this damn movie, and for the first time I checked out Motel Hell. Now this is basically a B-movie horror comedy version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's the best way I can describe it. You got Farmer Vincent and his sister. They're basically running this farm where people come along, and just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they trap them, they put them into this little garden where they've got their basically buried up to their necks, and this is really diverting from Texas Chainsaw Massacre now. Just the setup is the same. And they're basically fattening these people up, and all the sausage and the meats and the smoked meats that this farmer Vincent and his sister are known for, famously in this town, is human meat. And this movie was an absolute gory, goofy mess of a fun time. It's a crazy little movie. If you walk into this knowing it's a B movie and you're supposed to have fun with it, you will have fun with it. It's not meant to be taken seriously. If you walk into this expecting something as grimy and as gripping as the original Texas Chainsaw, you're gonna walk away thinking, what the fuck? But if you know this is a B movie, a horror comedy that you're supposed to have fun with, there's a ton of sequences in this movie you're gonna remember. I mean, they have chainsaw fights with pig heads, you got people buried up to their necks and their fucking vocal cords split, a lot of crazy stuff going on in this movie. It's a wild good time. Check that one out. Moving on from that, I had a little bit of a double feature this week on movies that I always sing the praises of because I have always been a huge vampire fan, and ever since Twilight came along and fucked everything up for everybody, movies that are good, genuine horror vampire movies are slim pickings, and Stakeland and Stakeland 2 are leading the charge with the best vampire movies that I've seen since Twilight came around. Now, these are basically kind of straight-to-video movies. I don't know if these ever had like a theatrical release. I know the second one was only released on Sci-Fi Channel, and I'll get into that in a second, but this is basically a post-apocalyptic vampire movie. You have two characters. You have this young kid, Connor, and you have this guy, Mr. Sir, and he's kind of like the Blade of this universe. He's a human, but he's the badass. He's the guy that everybody knows about. If you say Mr. Sir is here, people like fucking, ooh shit, Mr. Sir is here. And basically, it's these two guys going across this post-apocalyptic world that vampires have basically wiped out just about all of humanity, and they're trying to survive. They're trying to make it to this mythical place that supposedly exists where vampires are nowhere near and everybody has food and water and everything's great, called Eden. Kind of the typical story in a post-apocalyptic movie, but the style and how going for broke this movie goes with the gore and how intense the vampire sequences are is what makes this stand out among the pack. The first thing that you see a vampire do in this movie is drain an infant of blood and drop it from the rafters. That's how going for broke this movie is. That's how much of a fuck this movie does not have about how squeamish you are. And I love it. This is an awesome, awesome vampire movie. It's a really cool twist on having kind of the post-apocalyptic world with a vampire movie. Can't recommend this one enough. Kick-ass vampire movie. Now, talking about the sequel, Stakeland 2, which is kind of dubbed the Stakelander in some forms. This was a movie that was going to be released exclusively on the Sci-Fi Channel, and that worried the hell out of me. Usually when you go straight to TV, that tells me it's a giant red flag. The movie doesn't have any kind of a budget and it's gonna suck. Well, I'm here to tell you people, I was shocked at how awesome Stakeland 2 was. I think it's just as good as the first one. Again, reuniting years later, you have Connor, who now has a family of his own. Some tragedy befalls him. He has to track down Mr. Sir to get revenge for what befell upon his family. And basically, you have like this female vampire who's kind of like the alpha vampire. She's the main boss, or the main kind of villain of this movie. And just the whole thing about bringing these two characters back together for revenge, and the acting performances, especially by the guy who plays Connor in this one, I mean, miles above what he does in the first movie. Totally impressed me. Great little double feature. You can get both these movies on Netflix right now. They're free to watch on Netflix, so do yourself a favor, watch one and then watch two. Guarantee you they're the best vampire movies you're gonna see from the past 7 to 10 years, guaranteed. All right, the next one that I watched, I'm cheating a little bit because this isn't a straight up horror movie, but this is one of the most horrific movies that I've seen. It's really kind of an action thriller with a lot of horror tone and a lot of horror style in it, and it's honestly my favorite foreign film that I have watched so far. If you know anything about me, I have not dipped my toe into foreign film too much, and a buddy of mine, Anthony, has been digging into my back about watching foreign films for years. I watched a couple of them. I watched, some movies here and there that people recommended, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of getting into it. I can kind of, I'm getting over the subtitles. But when I saw the Devil, this made me think there must be a multitude of kick-ass movies that I have never seen that I cannot wait to uncover, because this movie, holy shit, is this an intense experience. Basically what you have is you have this murderer who kills this woman in the very beginning of the movie, and come to find out that woman is not only the daughter of a police chief, but the police chief, the woman who was killed, her husband or her fiance is actually a member of the Secret Service. And the whole thing is basically a revenge tale. The Secret Service agent is now tracking down the killer of his loved one. Whenever he finds out who the killer is, and this is all in the first act of the movie, he vows revenge by fucking with this guy to no end. Every time that this killer goes to either murder somebody or rape somebody or do something vile to someone, the Secret Service agent shows up, kicks the shit out of him, leaves him unconscious. The dude has no idea what the hell is going on, and he just plays this cat and mouse game with him the entire movie. And especially when you run into the third act, when the killer actually starts understanding what's going on and starts flipping that cat and mouse game against your protagonist, this movie is awesome. It's one of the most intense movies I've ever seen. It's really, really disturbing. I mean, when you think if they're not going to show something or they're not going to quite go there, they're not only going to go there, but they're going to show you more than you would have expected they were going to show you. I cannot recommend this enough. Definitely know who you are going into this. Don't be squeamish. Don't be somebody that can't see a lot of really brutal visuals, because this is a brutal ass movie, but cannot recommend it enough. My favorite foreign film of all time so far, I Saw the Devil. Check it out. And rounding out my week this October is a movie that I have sung the praises for years. It's still one of the most, if not the most underrated horror movie that I have ever seen. People do not talk about this movie at all, and the ones that do say exactly the same things that I'm saying 9 times out of 10. You find the rare person that thought it was a little bit too slow, but that gets into what I'm going to talk about with this, and that is Session 9. This is one of, if not my favorite, postmodern kind of horror movie. Basically what this is, and this was a direct-to-TV movie, shockingly, and you cannot tell at all. Basically this tells a story of a group of asbestos workers. They are going into this old abandoned insane asylum to clean out all the asbestos. They have 1 week to do it, and it's just these 4 or 5 guys, I can't remember exactly how many characters there are, I think there's 5. They're all stuck in this insane asylum, this old grimy, weathered, decrepit place where people just died of agony. And the movie is all about tone, and it's all about atmosphere. It's not about jump scares. There's no monsters lurking around the corner. There's no serial killer coming to murder everybody who is camped out in the insane asylum and they woke him up from his sleep. Nothing like that. It's just all creepy tones, creepy atmosphere, amazing lighting, crazy good sound design as far as sounds that will chill you down to your spine. And you just go along this journey with this asbestos crew, trying to figure out what the hell's going on in this place? Why are these people starting to be kind of consumed with this weirdness? There's something going on with one character that almost feels like he's being possessed. There's something going on with another character where it feels like he's looking into things he shouldn't be looking into. And it's just not only well-rounded characters and a well-rounded kind of story and a story-driven movie, but I'm telling you, if you are somebody that doesn't appreciate jump scares, you don't appreciate the tricks of Hollywood, you just want a movie that's genuinely unnerving, genuinely scary because of the way that they use the camera, you cannot find a movie that does it better than Session 9. You got David Caruso in this, a couple other actors that you're really going to recognize. So Josh Lucas, he was around for a little while. It's a really, really, really unnerving, freaky-ass movie, especially when they start getting into the things that actually reflects the title, Session 9. There's these tapes that one of the characters finds of these 9 sessions of this one specific inmate who had multiple personalities, and every single tape that he listens to is another personality. And much like Black Christmas, where the voice just totally goes right through into your spine and chills you down, this movie does the same thing, and each session the voice gets worse. So if you are a true horror fan that likes classic horror that does not use the tricks that Hollywood abuses nowadays, I cannot recommend this movie enough. Please, if you watch any movie on this list that I've watched this week, check out Session 9. It's on Blu-ray. It might be on some streaming services like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Instant Video. I'm sure it's on at least one of those, but trust me, do yourself a favor, check out Session 9. and then tell me down below how grateful you are that I introduced you to this horror classic. Well, that's all the movies I watched this week, guys. Please let me know down in the comment section below, or come over to my channel, Cody Leach, and tell me directly if you watched any of these for the first time and became fans of any of these movies. I would love to hear from all of you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Lee, for letting me be a part of 31 Days of October. Thank you, Durbin, for being my co-host this week on 31 Days of October. Cannot wait to be back in this video series next year. Cannot wait for Halloween to get here. You guys rock on.
Thank you, Cody. Those were some interesting choices. Next up, we got Durbin from Durbania. He does a lot of great quality content. I like how he'll actually go to his car right after a movie and he'll record his initial reaction, because a lot of times your initial reaction is going to be a lot different than, letting the movie percolate. And then he'll usually come back and do a full review after it percolates. So I like that. But anyway, take it away, Durbin.
Hey everyone, my name is Durbin. I have a channel here on YouTube called Durbania, and I do a lot of movie reviews, trailer reactions, ranking videos. I have this other thing that I do that I think is really fun called a theological analysis, where I like to take movies apart, dig deep into them, and find meanings behind things. I have a lot of fun stuff like that over on my channel. Would love to have you come over and check it out. But right now, I am beyond excited to be here on 31 Days of Halloween. So thank you so much, Lee, for inviting me to be a part of this. This was super fun and super exciting. I got to see a lot of movies that I had never seen before. And the great thing about the movies I'm going to talk about, a lot of these movies, I just went in completely cold. I'd heard that they existed, didn't know much about them, and it was really cool to finally dig in and explore. So I'm super excited about that. So my first movie that I want to talk about is The Thing from 1982 with Kurt Russell. Oh my gosh. I think of all the movies I'm going to talk about here, this was the first one I watched, and it remained my favorite through everything that I watched. This one was just incredible. I mean, it's like this science team on Antarctica. So they're already in the remote middle of nowhere and, contacting the outside world for help and things like that. That no matter what, that takes a ton of time. So really you get this picture that it's just these group of scientists completely isolated. And this movie opens with these people in a helicopter and they're shooting at a dog, like this beautiful husky. And it's like, what is wrong with those people? And then later the movie flips and you go, what is wrong with this dog? And it's because it's The Thing. What is The Thing, you ask? Well, that's the beauty of this movie. I still don't know what The Thing is. I mean, during the opening credits, you see a UFO crash, so you know its origins are not of this earth. But really, the interesting thing about this movie is The Thing is a thing that likes to basically clone or take the shape of the creatures around it. It's like its defense mechanism. It's how it survives. So the dog really wasn't a dog. The dog was the thing. And once the dog gets onto the American camp, it begins to take shape of the people there. It kills the people and then takes their shape and becomes that person. And you can't tell who's the thing and who's the person. And so what was just so interesting about this movie to me was just the intensity of that. It wasn't so much a monster movie. And yeah, you get scenes where you get to see some crazy monstrous things, but that wasn't what this whole thing was about. It was about your imagination. It was about your imagination running crazy on you. Who is the thing? What is the thing? What is this thing capable of? And are we all gonna die? Is it gonna take over the planet? And it's interesting to learn its potential to take over the planet. I mean, one of the scientists on this team was so consumed with the idea that if they left Antarctica, he went absolutely nuts, and he's not the thing, and he's killing people. Or is he the thing? Oh, that's deep. The point is when I was watching this movie, the best part of it was just the intensity of it. Now, I don't want to get too much deeper into this because I really don't want to run the risk of spoilers. I'll just say it was a really intense movie, and the best part of this movie for me was just the intensity of it and how it just plays with your imagination. How you absolutely trust nobody in this group because anybody in this group could now be the thing. And as they're trying to come up with ways to test who's the thing and who's a person, all of that stuff is just incredible. So I think The Thing was probably my favorite movie I watched for this 31 Days of Halloween. It's just a great movie. The next movie I watched for 31 Days of Halloween was 1985's Fright Night. And I've heard that this one has also been remade, and I'd be curious to check out the remake of this. But I just wonder, can the remake really live up? I mean, this was a movie I knew nothing about, went into it completely cold, and the basic plot is you just have this teenage kid, Charlie, and a vampire named Jerry moves in next door. And Charlie figures out he's a vampire because he sees strange things like a coffin being taken down to the basement, body bags being brought out of the house, women show up at the house. The next day they're on the news as found dead somewhere. So he knows there's something very weird about this house. And then he spies on the guy and sees the fangs and sees the claws, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's a vampire, and vampires are real. And so, like, you feel for this kid because he knows there's something wrong with this house, and he's trying to do the right thing. But number one, he's a teenage kid, so nobody wants to listen to him. And number two, he drops the V word, the vampire word, and then instantaneously everybody just writes him off as crazy and gives no care to the fact of the other logical things. Women go into this house and they disappear, including a young Helen Hunt who showed up for like 5 seconds in this film. I was like, that's Helen Hunt from Twister. Not mad about you or any other project she's done. No, I think about Twister. But the other thing that I really liked about this movie is, number one, it was lighthearted and it was a comedy. Like, there's a lot of really funny situations in this movie, and I did enjoy that. But beyond that, the thing that I really enjoyed about this movie is it followed vampire lore. And now we live in a day and age where you have things like Twilight. And what do things like Twilight do? They take vampire lore and they drive a stake through its flippin' heart. I mean, you have vampires that can't go into the sun because they sparkle. I mean, that's not a vampire. That's not how that works. And so what was really cool and what I really enjoyed about this is not only was this like funny, not only did I enjoy this, but it followed vampire lore. It followed rules like a vampire doesn't have a reflection. How could they have a reflection? They're not alive to cast a reflection. You drive a stake through their heart and they die. Another thing that I liked is they can't really come into your house and torment you until the rightful owner of that house invites them willingly onto the property or into the home. Then they got the right to come in there, and I thought that was interesting. And then the whole deal with the crucifix. What I liked what they did with the crucifix in this was one character holds up a crucifix and Jerry the vampire laughs it off. Another character holds up the crucifix and Jerry the vampire freaks out like it's kryptonite. The difference being is faith and what you believe behind that, and I thought that was really awesome, the way that they did that. And sunlight kills the vampire, not makes him sparkle, it melts the vampire. So the fact that you have this movie that I think is pretty funny and has some pretty funny situations, being about a teenager kid who has a vampire neighbor named Jerry, so of course it's got funny, hilarious situations. You got this actor who hosts a show called Fright Night named Peter Vincent, and he plays a character as the host, you know, as this vampire hunter. So when Charlie thinks, well, vampires are real, so Peter Vincent must be a real vampire hunter. No, this guy's an actor. And when they bring him into the situations with the vampires, then it proves this is real. I mean, there's a lot of funny situations with that. But again, the thing that I think makes me really enjoy this movie even more is not just the funny situations or their unique take on things, but it's the fact that it took vampire lore and it stuck to it. It was a serious thing and a serious plot point of this movie to be true to what vampire lore says about vampires and to stick to the rules of that lore. And honestly, I greatly respected that. I like vampire movies. One of my favorites is Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman as Dracula. And so when I see things that like obey those vampire rules, I really like that. So I ended up really enjoying Fright Night more than I thought because I went in completely cold. I went in not even knowing the basic premise, and so it was really cool to see that. So, I don't know. Funny movie, also intense movie, and really cool vampire scenes. So, that's Fright Night for you. Another one that I went into completely cold was Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. I had not seen this one at all. This one came out in 1982, the year before I was born, and I was kind of excited to check this one out. And what I liked about it, number one, is even though the title is Halloween 3, it might as well just be called The Season of the Witch, because it is just a perfect standalone movie, not needing Halloween 1 or Halloween 2. It stands on its own, so that was really cool, and I really appreciated that. And it was a really interesting movie. This one was, of these first three that I'm talking about, was probably my least favorite, but that's not to say that I don't like it. It's just I really like Fright Night a lot, and I really like The Thing a lot. So now that I'm comparing Season of the Witch to those two that I really enjoyed, that's why this one comes out as more of the weaker one, but that doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, I really did enjoy it. I thought it had a lot of great moments. Like the beginning is all really, really intense, and I'll talk about the beginning because I don't think that's spoilers because it's just the beginning where you have this guy going crazy, they're coming, and all the while you have this really annoying thing playing in the background, the Silver Shamrock commercial. If you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's this commercial with this horrible jingle counting down the days to Halloween. Oh, I hated that jingle. Oh, I hated it. I mean, I would seriously never buy a silver shamrock mask. Not just because, you know, it's one of those demonic things that might end up killing me later on, but simply because I hated that jingle and I would refuse to buy it as a meaningless statement to, I hate your jingle, make a better commercial. Anyway, it was a pretty interesting movie overall, that you have this creepy company, Silver Shamrock, and it opens with this guy who gets murdered by this really creepy dude in a suit. If you watch Firefly, the dudes in the suit that came for this guy reminded me of the show Firefly 2x2. Their hands are blue. I mean, they came with that exact same character. They came with that exact same lack of character. I mean, they just came in that same demeanor as the dudes with blue hands in Firefly did. And that's what I could not help but think of, that 2x2, their hands are blue, as they come chasing this guy in the beginning. And so you have this doctor who sees this guy get murdered. He goes to chase the guy in the suit out there, and then the guy in the suit just blows up his own car with him inside of it. But then they find like no human remains in the car later, so that's suspicious. The daughter of the guy that dies shows up, and then the doctor gets to be all creepy with her and whatever. And so he gets to be all creepy with her, and they have this weird, creepy love story, and they go to this small town to investigate Silver Shamrock, because all this stuff happened when the dad went to Silver Shamrock to pick up some masks, and then bad things went down. And so it was a really good movie in that it set up all this mystery behind Silver Shamrock. What is going on here? What is their plan here? And then there's a couple things that happen with the masks that you go, what on this green earth? I mean, there's one scene in particular that I don't know how much to tell you, because either you've seen it or you haven't, and if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it. But this lady puts on one of the masks and something crazy happens, and it's a little bit freaky. And it's one of those things that just deepens the, what on this green earth is this company? This is like the wicked Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. What are they doing in this company? And so, like, I thought it was really good, and it did a really good job bringing up that air of mystery. However, like, their resolve, like, where the masks were coming from, where the power was coming from, I was like, oh, okay, that's, I mean, it wasn't a cop-out or anything, but it was just, it wasn't something that, like, super impressed me. But overall, I still enjoyed it. Like, there was nothing about it that was, like, bad, or that I'd say don't see it. It is a good movie to watch for Halloween, especially if you want that Silver Shamrock song stuck in your head, like it is in mine right now. So the next one I watched for Halloween, I somehow got in the Christmas spirit. Seriously, I was just scrolling through Netflix, and, you know, because I was doing this for Lee, I just went through the horror section. It was kind of scrolling through, and I saw this thing called A Christmas Horror Story, and I thought, well, what is this? I mean, the cover had, like, Santa battling Krampus, and I was like, okay, let's see what this is. And the description sold me, that it's like these 4 different stories that kind of intersect, but really they're their own individual stories involving Santa Claus in the North Pole with zombie elves, involving some family and them losing their child, and then a changeling comes in his place and creepy things ensue there. Some crazy stuff with some teens locked in a basement on Christmas Eve at this school, and creepy things going on in that basement. Let's not forget you have William Shatner in this movie as a radio host. I mean, come on, William Shatner. Then this other family with car troubles in the woods, and like Krampus is like hunting them in the woods. So you got like these 4 stories going. They sort of interlock, like you could tell that they're all related, but they're their own separate plots. And so what this movie does is it will pick up with one and then fade out, go to the another, and usually as it's fading out from one to the other, it goes to William Shatner talking on the radio about how we need to be in the Christmas spirit. And in some ways he does take one of the stories that feels like it's totally detached from everything else, and he kind of brings it home a little bit, but I don't want to say any more because this was just a fascinating movie. It's weird because I watched it, and so of the 4 stories, I think there was only 2 that were genuinely interesting to me. And oddly enough, if you know me and my personality, you would think Santa at the North Pole with the zombie elves would be one of the ones that truly interested me. No, the 2 stories that really interested me were the kids that were locked in this creepy basement, and crazy things were happening because the girl decided she wanted to be there to film something for a school report, because a year ago on Christmas Eve, bad things happened in this basement. People were murdered in very gruesome ways. So she decides, yeah, the smart thing is to show up here 1 year later. Let's do that. And then, of course, you know, the stuff that was haunting the basement started haunting them and got them locked down there. But that story was genuinely creepy, and my wife and I both jumped a couple times with that one. And then the other one that was creepy was the changeling story, where they go to, the mom and dad and the kid, they go to chop down a tree for Christmas on Christmas Eve. They cross the no trespassing sign, and then their kid disappears. Then their kid reappears after frantically searching for him. They get back to the house, and this is not their kid. I mean, it looks like their kid, but it's not acting like their kid. It is creepy stuff, man. Would I recommend this movie? I don't know. I don't know. Seeing as how I really, of the 4 stories that it's trying to tell me, I only like 2 of the 4 stories. I can't say that I super recommend this one, but I will say that it was indeed fascinating. And while I was watching this one, fascinated by it, they kept talking about Krampus in this. So I thought, it's been a while since I watched Krampus, so I then watched 2015's Krampus. That's a fun one with Adam Scott. I always think of him as Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec. Overall, I don't find this movie that scary. I actually find it kind of fun. It's got a good message, though, about Christmas. Why are we talking about Christmas? It's Halloween. But it has this good message about Christmas, about being utterly consumed with the commercialism and the shallow parts of it. And this is like, you know, the stuff that summons Krampus, this Christmas spirit who comes not to give, but to take and to punish. And the way they did the design of Krampus, I thought was actually pretty creepy. If you saw this movie, I enjoyed it. It's not one that, like, I'm rushing out to own. Like, I don't want to own it. But I watched it on the big screen, and I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it again. Still no desire to, like, go out, buy this, and own it. But it's just one of those movies that, like, if it's on, I'll stop and I'll watch it. I find it interesting. So, if you're in that same position, Krampus is an interesting one. Last but never least, this is a movie called The Visitation. I'm gonna be straight up honest with you about The Visitation, though. This is a B movie. Like, 110%. It's an independent film. It's definitely a B movie. It was straight to DVD, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I'm just saying, like, this might be worth a rental or something, if you can even find it. I don't even have it on Blu-ray, and I don't even know where to go to find it on Blu-ray. I bought this probably when I was in college, because back when I was in high school, this is based off a book by Frank Peretti called The Visitation, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book. I remember reading the book and absolutely loving it. So I went ahead and got a hold of this movie. And the main plot of this film is you got this small town, and this guy shows up claiming to be Jesus and to be Jesus coming back. And he's got the scars on his wrist and stuff to prove it. And then he starts doing miracles. Like, he holds these, like, big tent revivals, and he does all these miracles. He opens blind eyes. I mean, he does, like, all these crazy things that you think would be good, except his miracles come with a price. So you show up to his big tent revival and you go and you get healed. Well, it turns out you didn't really get healed. It turns out now you're an open door for a demon just to walk in and possess you anytime. I mean, the tagline of this movie is everyone has their demons. And so that's kind of what this movie's about. It's about this guy claiming he's Jesus, showing up in this small town, performing miracles, but then with each miracle, like, comes this price of demonic possession. And so little by little, this town begins to get possessed, except for some of our main characters. And one main character in this was once upon a time a minister, but his wife was killed brutally in a satanic ritual, so he dropped his faith, he dropped all of that. But when this guy shows up claiming to be Jesus, like, he's not one of the people that buys it. He's not one of the people that goes up to receive a miracle. He's one of the people that begins to investigate this, and he becomes our main character, trying to figure out what is now going on with this town as darkness is beginning to settle in. Very fascinating film. If you can't find the film, don't worry about it. I would highly recommend check out the book by Frank Peretti. Very good book. I haven't read it in a while, but it has stuck with me, which is how much I really enjoyed the book. And so when I heard it was a movie, even though it was straight to DVD, I was like, yeah, I'll go check that out. So I went and got it, and I still got it right here. So there it is. 31 Days of Horror. These are the movies that I've been watching and checking out. I just want to say a huge thank you again. Thank you so much, Lee, for having me on and having Cody Leach be my co-host this week. So that's really cool. Cody and I have done a lot of stuff on my channel, talking about DC Comics, DCEU, and all kinds of cool stuff. So if you want to check out Durbania, make sure to check that out. I have a lot of fun over there. And I'd love to have you come over and talk about movies and all kinds of cool things like that. So would love to have you check that out. Thank you again, Lee, for having me on.
Thank you, Durbin. Looking forward to checking those out. Next up, we're going to talk about what I watched. I have my computer here. I have my letterbox pulled up. Got some really interesting choices for you guys today. First off, we're going to start with a good friend of mine, Dylan Clancy, recommended this movie. He's been pushing this movie on me for quite a while now, and the movie is Tenebrae. It's a Dario Argento film, and I reviewed this one a couple weeks ago, and wow. Amazing, amazing film. I wasn't even planning on reviewing it, but it moved me so much that I had to jump behind the camera immediately. Loved the hell out of this movie. And that's because of Dario Argento's direction. He's just such a stylistic director, and I've never seen any of his other movies, including Suspiria. So this made me want to dive into some other content that he has done. As a matter of fact, in the comments of that review, everybody was like, oh my God, you've never watched Dario Argento? And they were just naming off all his movies. He's done so many big movies. So definitely looking forward to diving into his catalog. Next up, I watched a Netflix zombie movie called Here Alone, and I really enjoyed this. It's about this one female. She is stuck in the woods after a zombie apocalypse, left to fend for herself after her husband and her child died. And you know that at the beginning, but then as the movie develops, you kind of figure out what went wrong and how that all happened. And then she comes upon this other couple. And there's a lot of drama in it, but it's good drama, and it really works. And to be honest, it felt like a really good episode of The Walking Dead. I dug the hell out of this. Definitely check that one out if you're in a zombie mood. Next up, I watched the Belko Experiment. This is a really effective movie, actually. And I remember before I watched it, I wasn't that hyped for it. But it is a fun scenario, you know. It's one of those big what would you do in this situation type of movies. And I think the reason why I wasn't keen on it is because the situation at face value sounds ridiculous. Like, you have to kill this many people, otherwise we're gonna double that. And at first glance, you're like, there's no way I would kill anybody. But then when you watch this movie and you see how it all unfolds, then you kind of get the character's motivations, and it really works. Some nice surprises along the way. And it's a fun ride. I love horror movies that are just a completely chaotic, fun ride, and that's what this is. It's a roller coaster. My next two movies, I did some old classics, because every now and then, you gotta throw in some old classics. Started it off with Friday the 13th, the original Friday the 13th. And it's funny because a lot of people do not put this one at the top of their Friday list. It's always some sort of Jason movie that's at the top of their list. My list, Friday the 13th Part 4 is at the top. But I still love the original, you know, it's a good little whodunit. And, you know, spoiler alert, Pamela Voorhees, I think she is just as interesting as Jason is. And I think she owns it in this movie. If Betsy Palmer wasn't such a great actress, it wouldn't have worked as well, but you buy how completely insane and crazy she is. And she did a great job, and you have a great cast in this, including Kevin Bacon. So I throw in the first Friday the 13th every year. I have to, it's great. And then I followed that up with my favorite movie of all time, John Carpenter's Halloween. You cannot go wrong with Halloween. I've talked about this movie ad nauseum. What else can be said about John Carpenter's Halloween? It's the template. It really is. All these slashers that came out after it looked easy. They thought, hey, if I do this, this, and this, then I'm gonna have a winning formula and it's gonna be a great slasher movie. But they didn't have John Carpenter. And there's your first major problem. If you don't have John Carpenter, then you're not gonna win, because you can't really blame it on the story. It's a really simple story if you get right down to it. But just the tension in that movie, the direction, and how the kills are just so dragged out, almost painstakingly, but it all works so well. So can't say enough about John Carpenter's Halloween. Anyway, guys, that is it. That is week 3 of 31 Days of October. I would like to thank my good friends Cody Leach and Durban for Durbania. Really enjoyed having them on the show, and looking forward to future collabs with them. And now it's your turn, guys. Post in the comments what you watched this past week. I want somebody in there to just wow me. Throw in a movie that there's no way that I've ever heard of it and the rest of the comment section has never heard of it. That's a challenge to you. Do it. Go. Also, come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day, every day. And right now, it's 31 Days of October, so everybody's posting what they're watching, getting a lot of great ideas, and it's just fun for everybody. Also, follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. If you like what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.